and work on the insurance claims.
Yeah.
Also, we're partnering with Westbank, that is the holder of the RT46 contract. In that contract, there's more than 150,000 vehicles. So it's a big cake for everybody to actually to share. And how do we ensure that they compete with the established businesses? We get them to get the right accreditations, like the RMI.
Yeah.
So we fill that gap. And those that do not have the right accreditations in terms of qualifications, we've got our own trade test center where we do gap analysis to see what is it that they're short of for them to qualify as either as mechanics or panel beaters or spray painters.
Yeah.
And then we give them the red seal in our facility. So that is the role that we are currently planning. And we have had engagements with the representatives of the Limpopo government in our facility, whereby we're willing to share the knowledge and also to assist in setting up these aftermarket centers.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mzinyathi. I was very intentional to start with Mzwakhe from the policy side and then yourself, because if you've got the policy support and you've got these initiatives, as a province, we need to start thinking what is next and what opportunities can we tap into. I'll come over to you, Mr. Joubert, regarding your role as zero carbon charge. Whenever people hear zero emissions, they cringe a bit because it's some form of disruption in the industry. But if you can just take us into what you do as an organization, and particularly how you look at bringing that towards investment as well, or driving investment in the Limpopo province.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the Premier and our hosts here today at this amazing event that they've put on. Like my partner always says to me, remember to say all protocols observed, so all protocols observed. When people look at the migration to electric vehicles, they fail to recognize that it's not so much a revolution in automobiles, but it's an energy revolution. And I think the impact of that revolution is going to be similar to the impact of the internet and on cell phones, on our lives. It is the ultimate localization, democratization of energy production.
Yeah.
And what we've set out to do is to set up a catalytic project to enable people to migrate to electric vehicles, to give them the comfort that they can drive anywhere on a national road, and there'll be a charging station at 150-kilometer intervals that's always on and is powered by green energy. So what we do is we build a solar farm with battery storage. We generate all the electricity on site and we sell it on site. So in the Limpopo, currently for our first stage rollout on just the national roads, we've got 12 car sites and 16 truck sites, because Limpopo is such an energy, such a transport thoroughfare. And that will constitute an investment of 4.2 billion rand in the province in the first phase. But what the most amazing thing about the project is, it's spread all around the country. It's not localized in certain energy areas. It's not in the coal fields. So at every 150-kilometer intervals, we build a power plant with a convenience store. At the truck sites, we build proper overnight facilities behind secure parking area. And the net effect is that every community where we build one of these stations become part of the energy value chain permanently. So we mine the ultimate renewable resource, which is sunlight. And that is absolutely amazing. And if we can manage to migrate our current fleet of vehicles to zero energy, the country will save 300 billion rand in foreign exchange. And to put that in perspective, our entire automotive industry exports at the moment amounts to 270 billion rand. So the impact of migrating to zero energy and localizing that energy is absolutely incredible. And I've got the privilege of being involved in that project. And I can announce here this morning our first station charged its first car this morning. So the hardware has been tested.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yobet. So before I come to you, Mr. Diteko, I just wanted to check by a show of hands, because I'd said if you have a question, I note you, but don't ask as yet. I will allow Dr. Diteko just to weigh in on the conversation. And if I can just note any additional hands, so when I turn again, I will check which other hands have gone up. Dr. Diteko, I think having engaged in this conversation and listened to the other panelists, I'm curious, one, as a NAMSA employee, but also on behalf of the audience to say, if you can just let us into the work that NAMSA is currently doing in the same space as well, of course from a thought leadership perspective, but some of the initiatives that we have done to drive some of the policy shifts as well that we currently see.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's on, by the way. I'm careful to protect the sound person. Sorry, yeah. I was careful to protect the sound person because she made sure that it's on, and she said if it's not on, she's in trouble. So one of the agreements that the auto industry has as an agreement with government in producing cars in South Africa was one, obviously the idea that you can't sell second-hand vehicles, you cannot import second-hand vehicles into our market. But a big portion of that is something called local value addition. We agreed with government that by 2035, 60% of content in vehicles that we produce in SA, that 60% should be local. It should be South African. Well, local in this case means it could even be from the region. So it could be SADC, a local content. And with Africa Free Trade, I think that local, when rules of origin will expand to also include members of the free trade area. Now, when we then, and Mzwake spoke about it, so when it comes to new electric vehicles, content will automatically get reduced purely because we're now bringing a new set of new components into vehicles that otherwise were not in the economy before. And in order for us to deliberately work on increasing that local content in cars that we produce as a country to that 60%, because with currently, just to give you perspective, 40% of the content in South African produced cars is local. And if that particular 40% was in the region of about 43%, it would mean that it's 8 billion that auto industry would have spent in local economy.
Sure.
So at 60%, you could imagine how many more billions would be added to the conversation. And in order for that goal to be achieved, NAMSA has to be deliberate around how it mobilizes existing resources within the economy and within the structure of our economy as a country to make sure that we continue to perform against that local target or local content target, so that the people that Mr. Mzunyati is training actually do have value and they are producing value, and auto is able to empower them. And so that black industrialist as a concept for auto, it's a positive case study. So it's important for us to continuously explore what local content means and how can we grow it, and where are the areas that it can grow, and then provoke conversations and thought leadership conversations around those particular areas. But the goal for 60% local content is how the auto industry will remain a disciplined economic role player in this economy. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Diteko. I noted the gentleman's hand. Fortunately, I know him by name, Dr. Mamar. If there can be a roaming mic, can I borrow this one quickly? Any more hands? Okay.
Thanks, ma'am. Tabang Mamaru. Just a quick one. South Africa's auto sector is more export-oriented, particularly to the European market as our destination. My question is, with what you had said as your opening presentation, how do you see the future of the country's auto industry in light of regional competition, not global competition? And let me contextualize this a bit. Rwanda is positioning itself as a what do they call it? The green mobility for sustainability. Next door to them, Kenya is positioning themselves as a regional hub for automotives. Ghana and Nigeria is doing the same thing in West Africa. But of key concern is the developments that we're experiencing in Morocco, that they are also positioning themselves as a regional hub for auto manufacturing. However, their close proximity to Europe, which is South Africa's export market, and the physical interconnectedness that Morocco is intending to facilitate with Spain through an undersea tunnel which will connect Africa and Europe, there are huge challenges that we are likely to be affecting South Africa's automotive industry. So according to your insight of regional productivity for South Africa, how would you see the future of South Africa's automotive industry in light of those? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mamaru. Let me take the question from the gentleman with the white shirt in the second row.
Again, thank you very much for the opportunity. Jan-Louis Spoelstra from the Flying Swans. My question is, I think there's two parts to that. And one is that our neighboring countries tend to import second-hand cars that's actually beyond useful life out of Japan or Britain and the like. With the introduction of electric vehicles in those markets, my understanding is that the recycling of battery components will mean that the supply of the second-hand vehicles into our neighboring markets will stop. So first, is there a strategy that we can start looking at an affordable vehicle to be manufactured in South Africa to replace the current flow of second-hand beyond life vehicles that go to the foreign markets? And then the second is, just on what Hubert was saying, we definitely need the green-powered electric vehicle chargers.
Yeah.
You know, I'm here with my electric vehicle today, so if the people see it outside, and there's another one, there's two on the premise. But the biggest question that I get from the public when they see that I'm driving an electric car is, where do you charge it? You know, the people don't understand that you charge it every day at your house, and when you drive long, yes, then you need to look for the chargers. But we need to get the communication out by government, but we also need government to start to commit. When I walk out here, Premier, MECs, all the different people with official cars here, there's a lot of petrol-powered cars. And the drivers were sitting in the cars, and the cars were on because we're trying to keep the cars cool. You know, my electric car, my aircon is on, and it's not polluting while it's doing that. Can we get government and the government of Limpopo to also take the lead in actually showing the world that they can start doing the transition on this side? And that will show the public that we can do the transition. South Africa can build the cars, we can build the components here, and we can totally save the country 300 billion a year on foreign exchange on fuel. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I would allocate the questions if I was a lecturer, but I'm not, so I will allow the colleagues just to weigh in the conversation. But I think the initial one, and Tatedi Teko, if you could respond to that, and I think Mr. Joubert, if you can also take the second one in particular, the third one, and the colleagues, Tatem Zinyathi and Mzwakhe, if you can weigh in on the second question, if you do recall. Tatedi Teko?
Yeah, thank you. So, for perspective, so we have a bilateral with the UK and Europe, and this is a regional, it's a regional bilateral. And it's a reason why we are able to send 60% of cars that we are manufacturing locally to that market as our primary market. But in the context of what could be, so, and this is the insights you're talking about. So India has about 1.4 billion people, and Africa as a whole, as a region, we've got about 1.3 billion. So almost same size population. And our GDP per capita, I think we're sitting at around the same amount of about $2.5 thousand, if I'm, yeah, it's around there. But the one element, and that's exactly the same thing, is that vehicle production in Africa as a whole, so including Morocco as a passenger car hub of Africa, I mean, they're producing around under 300,000 units. We're producing slightly above 600,000 units as a region. But all of us put together, we are under 1.5 million units. Now, you look at us as a region and our potential measured by how many cars India is producing. And India is hitting that 5 million mark. So you probably think maybe there's a potential for us as a region. Based on the similarities between us as a region, in that analysis that I've just given you, that perhaps we are performing at 25% of what could be. So our potential is 25% of what could be. Then you have to ask yourself, then what becomes your default strategy as OEMs in South Africa, looking upwards into Africa for that particular future-proof in that particular market? And the strategy then becomes, we then create mother plants in South Africa to supply those regions. So who's the biggest producer of vehicles, say in Rwanda, in Ghana, in Kenya, the countries that you've just mentioned? VW. Where's VW headquartered? Kariega in South Africa. So that headquarter approach means that we should embrace, even with our OEMs locally, that we are, if we don't think about regional production and shifting some of our production capacity into the region upwards, we're going to short-circuit the potential of what this industry can be. And that we're gonna have to see ourselves as a regional production hub that's aiming to reach that 5 million mark as a region, and then benefit from being the mother plants for those particular markets. I think that strategy future-proofs us. Now, the idea that second-hand vehicles, and you're right, the region has tried to say we should not import any cars, even with ICE, that are older than 5 years. So we slightly younger cars that would have some type of a shelf life. Then it would reduce the idea that you have more car ownership in Botswana than you have car ownership in South Africa. But we know that car ownership is actually not active ownership, because when a car gets broken because of how it's exhausted shelf life, they don't repair it for lack of that industrial capacity to have supply of components. And that is Mzinyati said, even in townships, that capacity is a big problem. So there's a challenge around if the battery life is supposed to be 20 years and we allow second-hand imports of BEVs into the region, I think those BEVs would actually have a more potent shelf life than ICE vehicles that we are importing currently. Kenya says that they'll no longer import second-hand ICE engines. They're going to import only electric cars. They are banking on second-hand imports to build that particular capacity. And so it's possible that second-hand imported electric vehicles are going to fuel adoption in the region. And it's something that maybe we brace ourselves for it, because the more you appreciate driving a battery electric vehicle, the more you don't want any other vehicle. I mean, I drive a new energy vehicle myself, and every time I drive an ICE vehicle or a manual car, there's a level of me that says, oh my wait, I'm cheating my kids out of their future. But yeah, that's where we are. I hope I've managed to combine the two questions. But we can speak after this. And on the question of government, I'd like to offer the provincial legislature and even the premier that NAMSA is willing to have a conversation just on adoption and what these cars means for the economy, and we're willing to come to give a conversation with all the members of parliament around electric vehicles and their potential impact on the region. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ntati Teko. Mr. Yobert?
I think when I embarked on this project, I knew everything we did was new. We had to develop the hardware, we had to find and permit the sites, and we had to engage at all levels with government. And I always despair that we make these COP commitments, but when you start dealing with the interfaces and the gatekeepers to facilitate this migration, it becomes impossible. There's a 1 hectare solar farm in the Western Cape that we've just passed 900 days in the permitting process. And if we want to migrate and we really want to grab this opportunity, if there's one message, take investors serious, make it easy, because people go where it's easy to invest. And I've now visited China various times during the development of this process and looking at hardware. And if you experience how easy they make the migration. But then I also want to raise a red flag here. that we're on the beginning of a revolution in mobility and car ownership and the view we view cars. I asked an audience the other night how many people still have fixed line telephones, and there was not a single person in the room.
Yeah.
We're at the cusp of that sort of revolution in vehicles. Qualcomm, the manufacturers of the iPhone, has already announced that they're developing 5 car platforms, and you can order a custom car from them on one of those platforms. And I visited a factory in China where for $19 million, they set up a facility that can build 50,000 vehicles a year, and they built 6 different models in the same factory. We've already seen the impact on Volkswagen internationally. We've seen Mercedes-Benz cutting jobs in South Africa. And I think we must prepare ourselves and we must steel ourselves that there's a revolution, but there's a great opportunity, and there's a great opportunity for this province to become a hub, because all you have to do is to attract one Chinese assembler, and you've got a 50,000 vehicle industry in South Africa, and that's critical mass. And once you've got that, the rest and all the motor industry players can attest to that. Like the Eastern Cape has become a hub, like Pretoria has become a hub for auto manufacturers, then the component manufacturers sit there, and I think the component manufacturers are actually in a better position than the actual car manufacturers. So we have to steel ourselves that we're in for a revolution, but there's a great opportunity for local authorities and for provinces to compete to host this really revolution into the future that's coming.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yobert. I know I'm left with 2 minutes, but if you could just wrap up, Zwakhe.
Just
if
quickly.
you, maybe in your weighing in as well, towards your closing remarks, if you can just touch on some of the measures or incentive programs that the automotive sector in Limpopo can start tapping into, but also the outlook in that regard.
Correct, I think for Limpopo must make itself to be the province of choice. There are an array of incentives that are available, automotive industry transformation fund. We also have investment incentives in the form of AIS, where companies and business people can tap into to form part of the value chain. But what is critical, it's our white paper is very detailed. It has 10 action steps that detail the intervention. So amongst other things which we should have elaborated on was the critical minerals intervention, where we want to expand the regional value chain in terms of electric battery manufacturing. Now that you are endowed with mineral resources, together with DMR, we should fast track as one of the catalytic projects the finalization of the beneficiation strategy, so that you can take into account these opportunities that are arising and benefit as a province by ensuring that you use these minerals instead of exporting them outside. I think that is very critical. And lastly, South Africa as a whole is a gateway to Africa and Sub-Sahara. So what is happening in Morocco is not a competition, whether it's Nigeria or other countries in the north. South Africa deliberately works with our sister countries in order to ensure that the automotive industry grows. That will benefit the entire continent. What they do there, they simply take the SKDs, the semi-knockdown parts of the vehicle, and they work as a finishing plant. So they complement the production here in South Africa instead of contradicting us. What we can talk about is the geographical dislocation. We are working closely with National Treasury to ensure that Transnet reduces the Wi-Fi charges at the ports. That's what we are doing currently. And that is also contained in the white paper. It's very detailed in terms of those interventions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mzwakhe. I was just concerned, and this is a parting shot, I'll ask it from you, Ntate Mzinyathi, that I'm not hearing any small, medium enterprises asking around some of the initiatives that the AIDC is doing in order for them to tap into this value chain. So I think maybe in your closing remarks, maybe if you could say, as a commitment, some of the initiatives, you've already touched on them in the beginning as the AIDC, but sort of a call to action from the province as well in terms of what they can tap into in your work streams.
Right, thank you very much, Collins. A low-hanging fruit is in the aftermarket space with the township business centers, the hubs that we set around the country. Because remember, with the geographical location as the province, to attract an OEM is going to be challenging. But the vehicles are mostly produced in the coastal towns. Yes, Gauteng is fortunate to have 3 OEMs. But if you look at the new companies that are coming into the country, they are focusing into the coastal towns because of the logistics reasons, for export purposes and so forth. But now, once those vehicles have been produced, they need to be maintained to keep them on the